Okay, so that's the final list of many lists of critical jobs that are completed now. It's taxed and insured, and there's only one thing left to do. Right, this is it. I'm bloody crapping it. Here we go. It's now or never. Okay, so that's the first road test of this thing under my belt. It got to the end of the road before it conked out, and I did get it back in one piece, so I'd call that a success. So let's have a look at what's going on. So when I got to the end of the road, there's a slight incline up the next street. So as I started to pull up there, the air-fuel ratio just went right the way up to 20. And of course the engine stopped pulling, started to want to cut out. So I made adjustments to the ECU, and to put more fuel in, I was able to get it back home. So here's the fuel pressure regulator down here. That's the cap goes on it. Let's get my hand onto that. It's fed by boost and vacuum, primarily boost pressure, and this is the diaphragm. So this holds the fuel pressure and I've had it quite low because these are very large injectors, and I've had it set at around 30 psi most of the time I was dynoing the engine. And if you've seen the videos, the engine dynoed beautifully with good AFRs, air fuel ratios. So I don't like messing about with the ECU because that was all set up properly in the first place. Anyway, when I got it back into here, I noticed on the screen that it had a fuel pressure of 21, I think it was. And I'd had a previous problem where it was running very rich after the engine had been sitting for 2 years. And on that occasion, the fuel pressure had gone right up to 50, somewhere around there. So clearly there's an issue with this thing somewhere. I mean, the diaphragm, it's got some corrosion where it sits against the aluminium, but there isn't a hole in the diaphragm. It looks fine. I mean, low fuel pressure could very well be dirt sitting on that piece in the middle. To be fair, it looked pretty clean. So what I want to do is I will get a new diaphragm for this regulator and try it again, because I think that's probably the only issue at the moment. I mean, the only other thing I found out by driving it is I thought it was going to be uncomfortable, but it's 10 times more uncomfortable than I ever thought it was going to be. So driving this thing any distance is going to be interesting. So there are a couple of things you might notice from the video. The transmission clunks quite a lot. It's a bit like putting a boat in and out of gear. That's a function of the modifications done to the transmission and the higher oil pressure in there, which are all done to enable it to handle a lot more power. But also, when the fueling is set up correctly, I can actually bring the idle speed down. I think it was idling about 800 RPM there. And the engine will comfortably run right down to 400. But there's a trade-off there. When you put it into gear, it has to not bring the engine down and make it stall. So somewhere in the middle will be an ideal idle speed. And of course, it's all to do with the fact that there's an overdrive behind the engine. And that's now got a ratio of 2.6, which means that the torque converter is running 2.6 times faster than the engine. And the original spec of the overdrive was 1.6 to 1. It means now, with the rear axle ratio that's set up on it, which has been the same rear axle from new, it's got something like an 80 mile an hour per 1000 RPM top gear, which means cruising at 80 miles an hour doing 1000 RPM. And so in first gear, as you could probably tell, it's just cruising up the road at about 20 miles an hour with no throttle, so which is fine. I mean, it's very easy to slow it down and everything, but ultimately the rear axle ratio is going to have to be changed to give it something like a top speed at the moment in top gear of something like 150 miles an hour. I don't know what the top speed is now. Theoretically, it's way over 200 anyway. So there's a few things to do, but I can get it driving with that rear axle for now anyway.